Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee. Everything school HQ. Everything school HQ. Meaning more and more this week, more than ever, with the Tennessee Volunteers becoming the college baseball national champions in Omaha on Monday night as they took down the Texas A&M Aggies 6-5. It was a fun weekend, a fun ride all the way through for the Tennessee Volunteers, but we joke in all seriousness about this being Everything School HQ on this very program. And that man down there in Tequila, Georgia, Pella University of North Georgia alumni, Matt Green, is he's in his feelings about the Tennessee Volunteers winning a title, because he can't hold it over this very program anymore, because he said, you call yourselves Everything School, but it might be just pretty good at Everything School because you're not winning titles. But unfortunately for Matt Green, the University of Tennessee are winning titles now. And it's as healthy of an athletic department as we've seen in a really long time up here in Knoxville, Tennessee. They're rolling across the board. Heupel and Rick Barnes were both at the game, with Peyton Manning up there in the box last night.
Kirby was out recruiting. That's what he was doing.
Yep, Kirby was out recruiting. Hey, whatever you got to do, man. Because I mean, look, you're a fall school HQ down there in Athens. It's not Everything School. It's just fall school HQ. Ohio State's the same way. There's nothing wrong with it, putting all your eggs in the football basket. But some of us, we like variety in our life up here in Tennessee. Matt Green, how are you?
Oh, I'm good, sir. After that long-winded intro you had there, I was a little confused at the start when you started talking, because I didn't remember you being a Florida Panthers fan. So because Monday night I was watching the Stanley Cup, I saw Edmonton and Florida, so that was a pretty intense game. So I didn't know they're playing. Were they playing a little baseball also up there in somewhere in the Midwest? Was that right? I didn't realize.
You didn't realize it because Georgia got eliminated a while ago, Matt Green.
No, it was. I was checking on it, but to be honest, I really was flashing back and forth, because I don't have to be into a sport, but if the stakes are at the highest, like, the national curling champion or the world curling championship is on, it's like this gold medal match. Okay, I might check this out. So I'm not a big hockey guy, but the Stanley Cup was actually it was really entertaining, that game 7, but. Yeah, I thought A&M, I kept checking on the score. I also had the Braves on flashback as well, but kept checking on the score, like, oh, maybe the Aggies, maybe they can get it done. But yeah, congratulations, I suppose, sir. You guys had to win a championship at some point. I mean, it's been going on 2 decades almost since their last national title. So big time win for the Volunteers. Pretty good at everything, still stands, but obviously, I think they've proven to be the best baseball program in the country in recent years.
Kind of like last the Braves 4 years, they're first in everything, man.
Kind of like the Braves back in the 90s, just being elite, but finally broke through and won that World Series. And hopefully for Tennessee, that's not the only one.
Hopefully, there you go, Matt Green. You're hoping for more titles for Tennessee. So
if you're a
Tennessee
fan, I hope this is the only thing, I hope this is the only good thing that ever happens for that school up there in Knoxville, Tennessee. But
how is the Green family taking this? I know your mom's a fan of the program. At least one of your brothers is the friend of the program. Like, were they nervous about you doing a pod this week after seeing what happened with Tennessee? Are you already...
I think you're gradually overestimating the magnitude of this blow that it took to the Green psyche. No, it was a big time win for sure. But college baseball, it is what it is. It's third most popular college sport, maybe 4th behind women's basketball. What do you think?
I think it is.
You think it does bigger numbers in the women's college basketball?
No. No.
So the fourth biggest sport in college.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the big ones, one of the revenue producing sports. Are those the only four probably that?
Well,
are
they're
really,
not revenue producing. There's only two revenue producing sports, and that's
it's just football and
men's basketball.
Yeah.
But yeah, hey, either way, Tennessee on top of the world. It's fun. I will say that it's like one of the differences that I think it's just so interesting getting used to this. And I'm obviously writing about every game over at TPL Tennessee, and like it's my job to watch and take notes and everything else that I would do anyway. But it's just fun. But one of the things I was telling my wife, where like we're in peak off season, like we're in recruit, like this is these last 2 weeks of June are just a huge part of the recruiting calendar now, and a lot of guys come off the board over these final 2 weeks, and a lot of stuff is done by early August in terms of next year's class and all that kind of stuff. And we're 66 days away, I think, now from Tennessee being back. Georgia somewhere around there too. You're just kind of getting the itch a little bit. Like it's one of those, you're watching these games, but I'm also like rapidly still researching for recruiting, looking at different things and thinking about depth chart and schedules. And now we have there's just a lot of stuff where you're watching it, but it's like, because the season goes so late, like we're in the end of June here, and the college baseball season starts in February. So it's been a long ride, and you get to this middle of June and you're like, when you're playing really good baseball and everything else, you're just like, man, at this point, I was really already all in on most years. I'm all the way in just the countdown mode for college football, because it's go time. We got to start memorizing these rosters, start getting ready for next season. And I'm still just like, man, it was just weird. I will tell you this year, more than any other year, is that just seeing Tennessee make it the distance, and also just compounding that with just the rapid, fast approach of college football being here before you know it.
Yeah, for sure. July, I feel like it's the month that start to rewatch some games from last year. You're like, let me go back and watch that Tennessee game from a year ago. Like, get back get the blood flowing again. Like the Georgia Florida game or something like that. You can always fire that up. Let me fire up a little 2012 game. Like I'll just watch like random games in the off season just to fill the time. But yeah, we're getting there. 66 days away.
There you go. Well, speaking of the Dawgs here on your side of things here, what do you have for us this week in Dog Bites, Matt Green?
Well, first is, I would say, big time news from the city of Jacksonville, who's basically approved the renovations for the Jaguar Stadium. So it's at partial capacity 2026. I think they hold I want to say it's like 60 something thousand. And that it's going to hold like around 40 in 2026, and then nothing at all in 2027. So I think Georgia, Florida is definitely going back to campuses 26 and 27. Maybe it goes to, I don't know. It'd be a shame if it went to like Mercedes-Benz for 2 years or something. But yeah, hopefully that goes back to campuses. That'll be fun for a couple of years.
Is that one of those things that once you do the campus home and home, that you think after the fact, you're like, I think we made a mistake? I actually kind of like that this was in Jacksonville, and the world's greatest outdoor cocktail party, and the vibe of all Florida fans and Georgia fans crashing North Florida for that weekend, and obviously the tailgating and the partying that led up to that game, that fans who've been clamoring to have the home and home will actually be like, we didn't know what we had until it was gone. And actually, let's go back to Jacksonville. Do you think that there's a possibility you'll feel that way after the home and home?
It's possible, but if it's just a temporary thing, then it's kind of like, I feel like the novelty of just doing it home and home. Like you might find out that you want to do this. Like, I mean, for one, you could find out you want to do this every year. Like, why are we even going to Jacksonville? We had college game day here in Athens. Huge recruiting weekend. Like that's what Kirby Smart's always talked about. Like it's a pretty huge recruiting weekend to give up for what's not necessarily the highest ranked team you play every year, but it is basically the biggest game of Georgia's season every year, just kind of in general. So to be able to have recruits at that would definitely change things. But I kind of like the novelty aspect of it, that like we might find out like maybe we should just do this every 10 years, like go to each other's campus, but then like we keep the Jacksonville thing alive. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's any real talk to just end it in Jacksonville, but I'm just assuming like if these 2 years or the renovation is going on, I think it's got to be a home and home for those 2 years.
Yeah, but I guess my thing is that like I do wonder if it's just one of those things where you do it and you're like, it's just so weird, because I think if you pitch Jacksonville now, right? Like we had been doing home and home for our entire lifetime, and someone says, we're actually going to move Georgia, Florida permanently to Jacksonville, the Jaguar Stadium, and we're going to call it the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. And we're going to do that every year.
We would
I think we would come on this program and be like, what? Why would you do that?
Jacksonville?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
no,
we would complain about
fair.
it.
It is on the border, so it might not seem that random of a city, but no, I think you're right. But the history is built in that it's just it's a party, you know, so it is definitely different. But like obviously Alabama, Auburn, the Iron Bowl's played in Birmingham for however long, and until it wasn't. So now the Iron Bowl has lost nothing over the last 30 years being played on campus. So I don't know. It might be the straw, like the straw that breaks the camel's back, because there are a lot of people that have been pushing for it to be on campus and kind of complaining about the city of Jacksonville and that sort of thing. But maybe if this renovation to the stadium happens, it kind of, makes that area of Jacksonville cooler, and people will be, more excited to go down there every year. I don't know. Maybe that's what they're going for. But I think just the fact that I want to say, was it 93, 94 or 94, 95? The last time they renovated the Gator Bowl, when they built the Jaguar Stadium, essentially, that was the last time they went on campus. And obviously, like at that point, Florida is like one of the powerhouses in college football, and Georgia's kind of a middle of the road SEC team. And they hung 50 on Spurrier hung 50 on Georgia in between the hedges. Like, you got to think the same type of thing is in Georgia fans' minds. Like Kirby Smart, he may have been on one of those teams that Florida scored 50 in Athens. So Georgia is obviously, now the tables are turned, and Georgia is a powerhouse, and Florida is a middle of the road SEC team. Honestly, they'd be good to get up to middle of the road with what they've been the last couple of years. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I still have an awesome time whenever I go to Jacksonville. So I'm not necessarily pushing for it on campus permanently.
I'm very curious to see what the response is, and I'm curious to see, like, I think the 2 years would be cool. I like, for me, it's just so funny because I think Virginia Tech, Tennessee should be a neutral site. Like you saw, Bristol was like this big time thing. I don't think I would do Bristol every year because
not in a NASCAR. Yeah,
no, because it's just too far away. The seats, it was like, that was a cool thing. But I mean, I've told this story, I think, on this program, where you go to Dollywood at Christmas time, like just count the schools you'll see. And the most common, you'll see Virginia Tech and Tennessee. For whatever reason, there's just a lot of crossover there. And I think it actually would be a fun rivalry, two passionate fan bases. Like, they should play each other and then find a middle ground. Like, maybe you do Bristol once every 4 years, but you do a home and home, or every 5 years, and you do a home and home before then.
Regional rivalries. What are you talking about? That's crazy talk over there, Chase Thomas.
Yeah.
And it makes too much sense to play schools that are really close to you in proximity.
Yeah. Who am I to
but I
suggest
didn't know that.
Such a thing?
I didn't know that until they played however many years ago. What was that, like a decade ago now?
Alvin Kamara.
It was like Bristol was like the exact midpoint of those two schools. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. So it's like, why weren't we already doing this? And why don't these two teams play more often? Like, there's no reason for these two teams not to play more often. Well, that'll be interesting. We still got a couple of years until that change happens. But my gut, what is your gut? We'll close it on this. Do you think they go back to Jacksonville, or do you think they see how it worked for these two home and homes, and they just don't? And Kirby and company are like, we're not signing back on, and we're just going to keep this a home and home. What do you think ends up happening?
I will say, I think it stays in Jacksonville, because I think I think the new SEC schedule is going to make like losing that Florida home game like just a little like easier to swallow, essentially. Like next year's Georgia's home schedule, I mean, it's essentially flipped. So next year's home schedule has Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, like right off the top of my head. It's like it's got some pretty big home games. And then like you've looked at Georgia's schedule the last couple of years. It's like you were kind of the home slate hasn't looked great. I think this year's home slate doesn't look very good. It would be nice if you had that Florida game in Sanford Stadium, but I think ultimately it stays in Jacksonville because I haven't looked at the blueprints, but I assume they're going to do something pretty cool to the stadium if they're renovating it. So it might make it even cooler to have the game down there. And I'm sure they're going to try to do something to entice the schools to continue to want to have that game in Jacksonville.
I like it.
That was part one of the dog bites. Second part.
Oh, there's a part two?
Second part, we're talking recruiting. I actually
give you two parts on a week that Tennessee just won a national title. Do you get a 2-part dog bites?
2-part dog bites. Isaiah Gibson, sir, 5-star, just decommitted from USC, commits to the Bulldogs. The recruiting landscape also got an inside offensive lineman. Don't remember his name off the top. Glover, I want to say.
Dontrell Glover from Langston Hughes.
Yeah,
4-star interior guard. Yeah, he's a guard.
So. Yeah, Georgia's just absolutely on fire on the recruiting trail. And I was looking at...
Well, hold on. I wouldn't say you're on fire. CJ Wiley with a stunner this afternoon out of Milton High School, the 4-star receiver.
Well, you'll never win
them all. The Dawgs for the Florida State Seminoles.
No, that's true. That shocked everyone. I think both parents went to LSU. And I think someone said a Florida State reporter wasn't even at his commitment. Like, he just kind of surprised everybody. But I'm not going to get into anyone's personal life, judging their decisions and how they're doing it. But did you see this man's interview afterwards? It was like, my recruitment's still open. I'm still going to visit schools. I'm just with Florida State now. And it was like, oh, okay. It sounded like the least commitment of all time. But
honestly,
yeah,
that's smart. Like to just be like, well, I'm committed, but that doesn't mean you can't work hard I haven't signed anything yet. That's how you should play it, honestly, is to be like, see what else you can get. Like, see if things change. Like, I think it's smart to play it that way.
Yeah, I mean, do what you got to do, So, but I'm not saying he's gonna decommit. I have no idea. Never met the guy, but he doesn't sound the most committed, and we know Kirby's gonna keep coming after him. So, but yeah, you can't get them all. So he does commit to FSU today. So George didn't get that one, but the fact that Justice Terry, the other 5-star defensive lineman from Manchester, he and Isaiah Gibson, I want to say, committed to USC on the same day, and then both decommit from USC like a day apart. Both, 5-star prospects from the state of Georgia. I would imagine they talk. I would imagine they chat. They're friends. The fact that now Isaiah Gibson has committed to Georgia, it feels like Justice Terry has to be, and he was once a Georgia commit. So maybe now he's committed to Georgia, he's decommitted, committed to USC, decommitted. Maybe we'll just take it to signing day and, figure it out from there. I'm not saying he's going to pull the trigger anytime soon, but Georgia's got to love where they sit right now. You look at the state of Georgia, there's 7 5-stars in the state of Georgia this year. Juju Lewis committed to USC. The other 3 that are committed are all committed to Georgia. And there's 2 more 5-star, number 1, number 2 defensive tackles in the country, both out of the state of Georgia. Like this thing, you look at what Georgia signed the last couple years on the defensive side of the ball, and it's absurd. I was stacking this up. 2022 signed 5 5-stars, a safety, D-line, cornerback, edge, linebacker. 2023, you signed 4 5-stars, safety, D-line, cornerback, linebacker. 2024, you signed 4 5-stars, safety, corner, and 2 5-star linebackers. And now, right now, Georgia's got a 5-star edge committed, 5-star linebacker committed, and then the two other defensive linemen I just talked about aren't committed, but obviously everyone's trying to get Elijah Griffin is his name, at the number 1 defensive lineman. Obviously, everyone's trying to get that guy. And that's just in the state of Georgia. Obviously, Georgia could land someone who's not in state that's a big-time player. But it's just absurd what they're doing in defensive recruiting right now. And from what the recruiting calendar has become, this June, July period is when all the commits are coming. And you've seen, I think Georgia's now up to the second or third ranked class in the country. And yeah, it's Elias Williams is actually in that last 4-year period. He's the only offensive 5-star they've signed. All of them have been on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Well, we're going to get into the blue chip ratio and where teams fall, because Georgia's actually not number one right now in blue chip ratio going into next year. And when you look at this class that this team has right now, they have 2 5-star corners in it. We'll talk about them in a second. But yeah, no, I think Georgia, it's one of those things where 2 things can be true. Georgia, and this is something that Tennessee fans, like one of the harder things about Tennessee football and getting to where they need to go, is they have to win some big boy battles in the state of Georgia for like the Mike Matthews of the world, like Isaiah Gibson, who they battled for here before we ultimately chose the Dawgs. Like, you're going to win some of them. You're going to win some of these battles. You talked about this in the program last week, but I think one of the things that will help Georgia sustain this level of dominance is that the state of Georgia may have the best high school football across the country right now. And it's not hard to keep guys home. And that's like one of the things where I think people have been dunking on USC for losing Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson. And I don't understand that, because it's hard to get these kids to move, like extremely talented kids that Lincoln Riley knows he needs to ultimately win a national title. Lincoln Riley knows he needs more Bear Alexanders on his defensive line. He knows he needs more stars. And the problem is, look at the sport. Look at what is happening to West Coast football. The Pac-12 is gone. Like, you see where the talent's coming from. Yeah, California has a lot of quarterbacks coming out of there, but you don't see a lot of big-time defensive linemen being brought up. And
sorry, that's just like the culture we live in now. It's like you lose in the championship, that's who gets trolled on social media. It's like, we were in the championship. We were the second best team in the league. Like, it was impressive that Lincoln Riley even got those guys committed to begin with, but obviously there's no points for second place.
And it's like, what do you want him to do? Like, he understands what he has to do to get to the next level. Like, do you want Lincoln Riley to not take swings at these Georgia kids and see if he can, because he got it last year. Like, Cam Fountain was a 4-star edge guy from Georgia. He pulls him across the country. He's there right now. It happens. It's just, you're not going to be able to, it's just hard, because guess what? Kids and their families want to be able to see their kids play. Like, you, vice versa. You want family to be close by. It's easy to sell Georgia to a 5-star kid in the state of Georgia to stay home. Like a Warner Robins kid, that's not a far, like, it's a drive, but it's not like, hey, this is just, we're going to have to fly across the country. Yeah. Like, it's just different. Like, it's a different kind of sell. And some kids are going to be up for it. Some won't. But to dunk on USC for losing 2 5-star defensive linemen to the state of Georgia and to the biggest college football empire going right now in the Dawgs, I don't really get that. I don't think Lincoln should get, and USC should get any flack for what they're trying to pull off. I will say,
no, I'm with you there.
Losing
and
those 2,
clear, Justice Terry is uncommitted at this point.
Right. And we'll see. I think he was at, Alabama's in it pretty big. Last I saw, was he there this past weekend? I think he had an OB at Alabama this past weekend. But USC now, I'm scrolling after losing those 2 5-stars. Where is USC on where did they drop to after losing? Because they free fell with those 2 5-star falls. They're 22nd now in recruiting. They went from like top 8 with Isaiah Gibson and Justice Terry to barely in the top 25. Like, it's just, that's brutal for USC fans. But by and large, like, USC, keep trying to do that. Like, keep trying to get these guys in the boat. If they commit to you early and then they flip, whatever, like, get them in the boat, because you're going, like, that's the other part of it. It's like, they are going to keep some of these guys. Like, Georgia's going to try and flip these guys back in the next cycle, whatever. USC, just keep doing it, because you're going to eventually, you are going to get some of these kids. Like, it's going to happen. And if you keep winning, like, it's going to be easier. Like, I don't know. I just, the reaction to Georgia flipping these guys, and Georgia fans like, oh, this is what happens when you mess with Kirby Bowl. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I mean, it's good that your team got him, and Georgia, they're going to be really good at Georgia, this, that, and the other. But like, let's not dunk on USC for trying to get the guys that you also covet and want on your football team.
Well, Georgia fans can dunk on them because they got the commitment, you know? So yeah, whatever. You flipped him. You can celebrate, do whatever you want. But I wonder, do we see like USC, like when they start to play these Midwestern schools, like does that give them a blueprint like in the Midwest, and they can start to get some of these big offensive linemen, maybe some of these big boys they got out in the Midwest, get a little more physical? Could that sort? I don't know. That sort of thing could happen.
It could happen. It could happen.
All
right. I can't believe I gave you 2 dog bites on championship week here.
I'm bringing good stuff. That's why.
There you go. EA Sports, though, they released their top 10 toughest places to play for the upcoming NCAA 25 football game here.
And everybody
Matt Green.
agreed, and there's no story at all, right?
No, I will go ahead and tell you, I haven't played a video game in like a decade. I don't know if you're getting the game or you're planning on it. It doesn't move the needle. I read it, and you just immediately know that fans are going to get upset about this. It's content, and you knew like every college football podcast was going to talk about this. We were going to see the graphics. Everyone was going to have their own perspectives on it. I'll run down the top 10 here.
Man,
I'll just go ahead and tell you.
You just 8-miled me right there.
I what?
8-miled me.
Hate to
like
see it.
The whole the freestyle where he says what the guy's gonna say before he says it. Whatever. Go ahead.
I haven't seen 8 Mile in a long time. That was a deep pull.
I think I heard Jordan Klepper drop that line recently. So I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I tried to use it off. It didn't land.
There you go. Hey, sometimes that's just how it works sometimes. However, Matt Green, the top 10 here, I have for you: Texas A&M at 1, Alabama at 2, LSU at 3, Ohio State at 4, Georgia at 5, Penn State at 6, Wisconsin at 7, Oklahoma at 8, Florida State at 9, and the University of Florida at 10. I'll go ahead and throw out for my Tennessee folks. They fall in at number 12 with only Clemson and Oregon ahead of them. I will also mention, because I 13. think I'll say it's 13th, excuse me. I'll also say that it's the team right behind them should also be in the top 10, in the Auburn Tigers, who we will get into in a second. But there was some people had some takes on this list, Matt Green, but what say you on what EA Sports did here in terms of ranking the top most difficult places to play in college football?
And this is obviously like a really tough thing to do. I would like to know what their criteria is, because you look at like some records. Like I was like, are we going off data? Or are we going off feels? You know what I mean? Like, I was shocked to see A&M number 1, to be honest. Like, I mean, I'm not like trashing their, like, I know people are going to be like, oh, they've lost like 6 games at home the last couple of years. How tough is it to play? Like, I'm sure people say that. And it's got some validity, but the team wasn't that great. That doesn't necessarily talk about the fans. So Michigan is 22-0 the last 3 years in at home. And it's like, that's basically recent history, right? Since the pandemic, last 3 years we had. Michigan's down there at 16. Like, I was a little shocked to see that. So it's like, are we going off data? Because I feel like that sort of data, Alabama's 20-1 at home. Alabama, I feel like, has never really been talked about as one of the loudest stadiums in the SEC. It's like they're the best team in the SEC, but the stadium has never really been like front and center when I think of Alabama. You know what I mean? Like, obviously they got like they have 100,000. I think they might be over 100,000 now.
Maybe, but I'll go ahead and tell you, Tennessee was up on Alabama 4 years ago. Wasn't really phased going into the fourth quarter. They were obviously up on Alabama at the half last year.
How'd that game finish, though?
What I'm saying is Tennessee has had trouble on the road, like at Florida. Tennessee had some problems in the Swamp last year at night. The Swamp gets loud. The Swamp causes problems.
Yeah.
Bryant-Denny doesn't cause problems. Like, they're just a really good team. So. Like, Alabama, what happened here was the Nick Saban effect of them just winning a lot of home games. And I think people saw the maroon lights, because they remember the light war between Georgia and Alabama, between who had the rights to do that. Yeah. I think that's all been misconstrued to think that Alabama is actually a tough place to play. And they're not even the toughest place to play in their own state. Like Auburn, when Auburn is rocking, Jordan Hare is a more difficult place to play than Alabama. Like that's what drove me nuts 100%. More than anything. Alabama is not the number 2. Like even just ahead of LSU, do some basic stuff here. No, it's not. Like going into Death Valley at night is not the same as going into Bryant-Denny. Like Bryant-Denny is not a top 10 place to play in college football in terms of most difficult. Like the team that you're playing has been the most difficult most years for 15 years now. But the actual environment, the fan base, part of it's like it's really commercialized. It's really expensive. Like there's a lot of sweet. Like it just feels like it's a bougie place to play now more than anything else.
Yeah, and I mean they're the ones that they're scolding fans for leaving early and all that.
Yeah, like that's it's just not. It's not that kind of environment. Like it's just not a top 10 environment anymore.
You know what? I think it hasn't been a top 10 environment like in the last 5-10 years or so. I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes a top 10 environment because maybe they get hungrier as a fan base. Like maybe they go 7-8 years without winning a national championship. And then they start to live on every Saturday again, like the rest of us have, because I think a lot of people will comment on Georgia being this high up for kind of the same reason. Like, oh, the team is really good now, but it's not one of the loudest places. But I think traditionally Georgia wasn't, but it's not just since Georgia got good, since Kirby Smart was hired. I feel like in 2016, before they were even good, it was like, okay, half the fan base doesn't want to fire the coach now, so we can all kind of get behind it. 93K day. It's like we're all rowing in the same direction now. And you've seen the teams like the Arkansas starting the game with like 3 consecutive penalties and stuff like that. Like Tennessee with the game a couple years ago with all the penalties and that game just going nuts. It's like you've seen the actual like difference Georgia's home crowd has actually made in recent years. The problem has been kind of the lack of big time games in Sanford Stadium.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And I think Sanford will be rocking, especially this year. There's more of an appetite. Big games matter, I think, here. What do you think's number 1? Because I was thinking about it, like, if I'm going to complain about all this, who do I have as actually number 1? I think I still go LSU. Like, I just think LSU at night is still, I would just say LSU
at night or LSU during the day? Is it the same thing?
It matters because I just think LSU at night
seems like it's points against them then, right? If it matters, Georgia was bringing it versus Arkansas. That was a noon kickoff, sir.
Are you doing this? Are you doing Sanford Stadium in the same as Death Valley? I think Penn State at night is right there. I think if I had to go, I would probably go 1 LSU,
give you my top
2
10?
Penn State, 3 Auburn, 4
hold on.
Tennessee.
You're counting. I was counting backwards. We got to create some suspense here. Can you want me to give you my top 10 now?
Go give your top 10.
Here's my top 10. Well, first of all, here's who missed it. Big time teams that missed it. All right. Utah, Oregon, Washington. I had Alabama outside my top 10. Also, the sneaky ones that don't get enough credit, although they were reasonably high on this list. South Carolina, Williams-Brice Stadium, underrated as far as rowdy environment. And then West Virginia. I got to show love to the Mountaineers. That's a rowdy environment. That's a wild card. Morgantown, West Virginia. So, number 10, I got to go Michigan. Number 9, Ohio State. And Ohio State's kind of teetering on that Alabama, like it's a big time stadium, but it's like the fans aren't always the loudest, but I still got to put Ohio State. It's still got to be one of the top ones in the horseshoe. Texas A&M at 8, Tennessee at 7, Florida at 6, Clemson 5, Georgia 4, Penn State 3, Auburn 2, and LSU number 1. What do you think about that list, sir?
Hold on. Do the top 5 one more time.
Number 1, LSU. Number 2, Auburn. Number 3, Penn State. Number 4, Georgia. Number 5, Clemson.
So we both have LSU. You were giving me grief about LSU at 1. Like, I think it's LSU at 1.
No, I was. But everyone always says that. Like, whenever they talk about Death Valley at night, it's like, okay, they do play some games during the day. So I was
going to say they do play some games during the day, and they get they sometimes get boat raced when they play at home during the day. I don't know if you seem to recall 2022 when Tennessee went in there.
I remember that one. I was down.
Blew them out.
And they also get more night games than like any other team in the SEC. So that doesn't hurt.
I think I'm going to go. Part of me, I think Florida has to be in the top 5. I think Ben Hill Griffin has to be in the top 5.
I feel like it's just been so long since they were like so good. It's like we've forgotten, but like the Swamp is like as rowdy as it gets, like when it gets rowdy, but it's just, they haven't had a lot to cheer about. Like Tennessee, they get them early in the season when they still have hope. They haven't given up on their season yet. That's a disadvantage Tennessee has when going to the Swamp. But yeah, I think you could definitely convince me. It's right up there. It's just it's been a few years since, and I guess that's one thing where the video game, maybe they change it every year. So right now, maybe that's how they see it. But I don't know. I was just surprised to see A&M up at number 1.
I was too, and I don't really. I mean, A&M somewhere in the top 10. It's just not the toughest place to play. Like it's just one of those where you know it's wrong. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you can look at it and you're like, this is. I could see where they came to it. I don't see how they actually came to them being number 1. You know what I mean? Like I just don't. I don't know how they got there, to be honest.
And Oregon is one that like. I kind of, and Washington, I feel like are the ones I more take people's word for, that it's like everyone says these places get loud, and Utah is another one too, that like it gets loud, but it gets loud in what a 60, 70,000 seat stadium. It's just not the same as 90,000 or 100,000 people going nuts.
Can I give you the most underrated? Pains me to say it.
Yeah.
It's South Carolina. It's Williams-Brice.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I didn't mean to steal your thunder there earlier, but I think it is. It's just it's been so long kind of for them since they were like truly relevant that it's like a just an actual scary place to play, because more times than not you can beat South Carolina, but I'm with you. I think there's something about their fans. They just go nuts. And that's why it's like it can't be strictly database. It's got to be a lot of vibes. And it's like Auburn, I'm sure, has lost a decent number of home games in recent years, but you just see the atmosphere in those games and it's like, wow, that home crowd is affecting the outcome of this game.
Yeah. And I don't know, like when they're rocking Williams-Brice at night, like as someone who has been at Williams-Brice when things are not going well, it can get ugly in a hurry. But they're underrated. They deserve some love.
You were at the 2022 game? No.
I'm just saying, like as someone who's seen what happens when it gets ugly and how like that fan base, they're rabid. It's they come to play. So no, they're definitely one of the more underrated ones. But that was fun, Matt Green.
Also, last one. Did you even know the name of Oklahoma Stadium?
I remember. It's weird you say that because I was looking at it when I was first going through this list, and I would not have been able to tell you the full one. I just, I think, always knew. I think I've said Family Memorial Stadium in my head. Like if you had asked me before looking at this list, I would have said Family Memorial Stadium. I remember Memorial more than anything, but I remember it was a long name, and I just thought it was Family Memorial Stadium or something. I did not know.
It is Gaylord Family Oklahoma Memorial Stadium for the listeners out there. But
yes.
I just don't feel like anyone's ever talked about Oklahoma being like one of the toughest places to play. That was the most random one on the list to me. That's like, I don't know. Like it's not like the biggest stadium. I don't think it's small by any means, but it's like 80,000. I don't know. I don't feel like its stadium has a reputation like nationally. Like they're a good program. I'm sure they have a good home record, but it's kind of like Texas too. Like football is huge in Texas, but something about the stadium is like, it's never felt like this loud, like difficult place.
It's felt like Texas Tech actually has the loudest, or I guess I should say A&M, obviously. I think A&M is definitely the most intense place to play in the state of Texas, but Texas Tech, I would say, is more intense when they're rocking than Texas.
But yeah,
right?
all those Big 12s, like Oklahoma State seems like it gets louder than Oklahoma, So I don't know. And Oklahoma State actually had a pretty good record. They were one of the top ones the last couple of years, 19-2 at home. So it's interesting to how they really came up with this list.
Absolutely. Well, Matt Green, let's get into the theme of the night here. We've got the blue chip ratio. Bud Elliott of 247 Sports, who does a great job over in the Cover 3 podcast as well. I'm always eagerly awaiting the blue chip ratio to be unveiled. The top 16 teams.
Big blue chip ratio guy.
I'm a big blue chip ratio guy, although it continues to change because the transfer portal and how that kind of clouds things, because Florida State's like, what do you do with them last year? Because they were 7th in FIP plus, which he talked about. And like, they were right there on the bubble. Like, what if Florida State if Travis doesn't get hurt and they're in that Final Four, does Florida State win? Do they win at all? I think they're in play. I think a healthy Florida State team would have been a serious
I don't know
contender.
that they couldn't have won it without Jordan Travis.
Well, we'll never know, but I'm just, yeah, you are right, Matt Green. We will never know.
Jalen Milroe didn't do much against that Michigan defense.
That's true. Well, Matt Green, when you look at this list that he's put together, so Bud's done his homework. It's been a big homework summer for Bud Elliott because he does the summer school pods on all the teams that everyone should go check out. Those are always great on the Cover 3 podcast channel. And I think what was interesting to me, and we should also just go ahead and throw out Florida State and Tennessee were just outside the cut. So they're right there on the border of making it. But again, this doesn't include transfers and this and the other. And we should also mention the University of Washington, who just made the national championship game, were not in the blue chip ratio last year. And the team the year prior was not in the blue chip ratio and made the national championship game in TCU. So there is something to that. But the teams that actually still won it all, that finished and raised the trophy, whether that was the 2-time defending champs Georgia Bulldogs or last year with the Michigan Wolverines, they were indeed still in that coveted blue chip ratio.
They were barely in, right? They were like one of the last ones.
Yes, barely in, but hey, still in. But when you look at this list, Matt Green, who's the most interesting team going into 2024 who will have one of the most talented college football rosters going into the season, just on star rating alone?
It's hard like to pick out the most interesting on the list, because you look at this list and it's like, yeah, that's college football. Like, these are like the 16 best programs or so, it's like the top 15, 20 or so. No disrespect.
Do you see that when you look at this list?
No,
these are the current
to the Vols and FSU not being on here. But for the most part, I mean, this college football is a top heavy sport, and these are basically the teams, right? There's a handful that are missing. But for the most part, like, these are who the contenders are. I think it's interesting because we know about the exodus, Alabama had to an extent after the season, at least losing several key starters to the portal. But to see them up at 88% still, it's obviously like it's noteworthy. Like, Bud Elliott's not saying to take this to the casino, that this is, as good as gold, but Alabama at 88% is still like, wow, that's this is still a really talented roster, and Kalen DeBoer is still one of the best coaches in college football. But it also makes me kind of doubt this calculation a little bit, because are we counting freshmen that have never played as like their ranking equal to a 3 or 4 year start, a 3 or 4 year player? Like, I don't know exactly how it's like. I'm sure there's a lot of good star ratings for current Alabama players, but this can't be the second most talented roster in the country, right?
I mean, it's not like they had a mass exodus after Saban left. There were some guys who left, but I mean, you get Caden Proctor back, obviously the blue chip 5-star tackle. Back, yeah. He leaves and comes back. You lose Caleb Downs, you talked about, but you get the Michigan safety. Was it Sab? What was his name? Something Sab, yeah. Who's a really good player. So it's not like, yeah, like they are going to start most. Like, you actually look at the roster, like, no, it's not. I'm surprised that it's higher than Georgia, but am I surprised that Alabama still has a top 5 roster in the sport? No, I'm not surprised by that.
No, that's fair.
The team on here that surprises me the most.
Hold on, but do you think their 2024 roster is top 5 in the sport?
No, I don't.
See, and that's why I think the kind of flaw is there, because I mean, they're still Alabama. They're not Saban's Alabama. They are still a perennial powerhouse program, but I don't know that they actually are that. Like, I would think someone like Texas, who's sitting down at 72%, what is that, like 8th or 9th on the list? Like, I would think Texas, just looking at their current 2024 roster, it looks like they have better players than Alabama.
Right.
Just them, for example.
I think for me, the one I have circled, because if you go back through Bud's history, there's a lot of teams that were in that 77% ratio. So Georgia was at 77% in 2022. Bama was at 83 in 2020. LSU won in 19 with 64. Clemson in 2018 was 68. And then you go back, a lot of 70s, upper 60s. So I was looking at that because Ohio State, which I think is still just hard for some fans in the Southeastern Conference to be like, Ohio State is best roster, but it's like, look at Ohio State's roster. Like, they just added Quinshon Judkins for fun this offseason. Like, you look at the group and who's starting for the Ohio State Buckeyes. You add Caleb Downs and company, but like, it's unbelievable just how much talent they have across the board at that 90% BCR is gigantic and crazy. But I'm looking more at the 70s and the upper 60s as to who could maybe surprise here and win a title. I think, to me, so let me just throw out who's in the 70s, and I want to get your perspective. Who do you think is most likely who's the best gamble to win the national title, who are in that upper 60s and 70% ratio?
So
A&M,
talking
79%.
Okay. Oh, you're going to name the teams? Okay.
Yeah. Oregon, 76%. Oklahoma, 73%. Texas, 72%. LSU, 70%. Notre Dame, 67%. I'll end it there.
I mean, I think the popular answer would probably be Oregon. Like, we haven't seen them do it, and I'm still like a little hesitant on them, like just joining a new conference like they are. And I think it's going to be an increase in competition and also a change kind of in style of play potentially. But Oregon just feels like the kind of team that the blue chip ratio doesn't tell the whole story either. Like, obviously, I think Bud Elliott did have the transfer portal also impact it. Like, with what they're just recruiting, Oregon is right there. And they're, as far as the top teams, the contenders right now, it feels like they're one of the ones that's utilized the portal as good as anybody, if not the best.
Yeah, I think Oregon is an interesting call here, but that's not where I'm going. I don't think they're the most intriguing and maybe the most likely team to win a national title based on where they're at this year, Matt Green. Do you know who I think is the most interesting that people are probably going to sleep on? I think it's Notre Dame at 67%. Notre Dame's got a good schedule. I think there's a strong possibility they go undefeated in the regular season. If they can keep Riley Leonard healthy, they bring in Mike Denbrock back, who just put together a Heisman campaign as the offensive coordinator for Jaden Daniels at LSU last year. Marcus Freeman has done a very, very good job recruiting it in South Bend. I think they have the pieces on both sides of the ball. They got playmakers. They did really well in the portal at receiver. I think they have a good one-two punch at running back. Like, it's not, people just have fatigue, Notre Dame fatigue from them making the national title and some of the stuff where it's like, okay, well, you didn't beat Georgia in your multiple chances, but they took Georgia to the wire. Like, I understand it was a different Georgia team still early on in the Kirby era, but those were awesome games, and they really pushed
both
Georgia.
Of those teams went 11-1 in the regular season.
And I think there's this misconception that Notre Dame is just is playing. They don't have the same, like, I think in the NIL landscape, people are like, oh, well, Notre Dame, they don't play in a conference, or Notre Dame, they just, Brian Kelly left you for LSU. So that must mean that Notre Dame can't be this, that, and the other. I think Notre Dame is the best just buy low candidate right now this offseason, because I think they're going to have a good seed. I think they're going to win a lot of regular season games. And I think if they can keep Riley Leonard healthy, this offense is going to be really good. And I think the defense is always going to be good at Notre Dame with this group. I would not be surprised if Notre Dame's in the Final Four, maybe even the national title this year. I wouldn't pick them to win it, but Notre Dame making the Final Four, having a deep playoff run, going undefeated in the regular season, none of that would surprise me. I would buy a lot of Notre Dame stock right now. They have the talent. They have the coordinators. I really like their head coach. I mean, they won what, 5 straight or 5 or 6 to close last year. They have momentum. Like, I would buy into the Fighting Irish going into next year. I think they'd get a lot of crap, and they don't really deserve it. So no, I'm gonna say on this list, who jumps out the most to me in that area It's Notre Dame, Matt Green. Have I swayed you at all?
I definitely thought you were going to say Texas, but yeah, a little bit. So would you say Riley Leonard is as good or better than Sam Hartman?
I think he's better.
Is he better? Can we count on him being healthy for 12 games?
It's that, but it's also like he at least played in a pro style offense last year. Like Sam Hartman plays in a very different kind of scheme at Wake Forest. Like that was a little bit different. Him having to go under center.
I mean, he's going to be. His legs are his best asset, in my opinion. Like, can he truly like that? It has to be a completely different system than what Sam Hartman is doing. He's just, to me, Sam Hartman is like your classic, just kind of prototype pocket passer, but you can have more success in college at times with the guy that can just kind of make plays with his legs and make things happen. So we've seen it before. I don't know that he's actually better. Is this roster better than it was a year ago?
Yeah, the roster's definitely, but it's hard to go from the mesh concepts that he was running in the Clawson offense, which is effective down there in Wake Forest. They were running different stuff with Mike Elko and company last year at Duke. I just think it's going to be a more seamless transition. I think Sam Hartman was fine last year for Notre Dame, but I think Riley Leonard has more upside, and I think he's going to be a better fit. I think Riley Leonard's going to have a really good year at Notre Dame.
Yeah, I could see it. I could also see us talking about Notre Dame being 10-2, and it's like, yeah, but they lost both of those games while Riley Leonard was out when he missed like 3 or 4 games in the season. Like I could just see something like that happening, kind of derailing their season. Not that I'm wishing.
Have you looked at their schedule though?
I don't have it in front of me now.
Okay, Matt Green, I don't see 2 losses here. Like I don't know how they lose 2 games. So they open at A&M, which is going to be huge. Obviously, they open at A&M. That's going to be a gigantic game. But then Northern Illinois at home, Purdue on the road, Miami of Ohio at home, Louisville at home, Stanford at home, at Georgia Tech, at Navy, Florida State at home, Virginia at home, at Army, and then at USC to close.
Wow, they play 3 road games the whole season.
1, 2, 3, 4. No, they play 4. 5. What do you mean?
Purdue,
what are you counting?
A&M, Purdue, and USC.
Hold on, look. It's Purdue, A&M, Navy, Georgia Tech.
Those say
Army and USC.
Those say verse Georgia Tech. I'm looking at their schedule.
I'm looking at it right now.
I don't know. This is a great
rating. Right now. It's at Georgia Tech.
It's okay. Wait, no. It's at a neutral location. Navy and Georgia Tech are at neutral locations. They got a little asterisk.
Are they? Where are they playing? Oh, they are playing. Navy's at MetLife Stadium.
In Ireland or something?
They are playing Mercedes-Benz. Why is Notre Dame and Tech playing at Mercedes-Benz?
Gotcha.
What is that?
Who's got more fans at the Benz? Georgia Tech or Notre Dame?
Notre Dame, no question.
So yeah,
that's crazy.
3 road games. Obviously USC, like that's always going to be a challenge, but I mean
Florida State, A&M's a huge challenge to open things up.
Exactly. So and then you got Florida State sandwiched in there. Like there's some losable games on that schedule. I kind of am still the believer that I think Brian Kelly is one of the best coaches in college football, and I wonder if he did max out how good Notre Dame can be in the 21st century. So, I think the jury is still out on that, but this could be the year Marcus Freeman proves me wrong.
Final big one here I wanted to pick your brain on, Matt Green. Do you think it'll be harder or easier for a non-blue chip team to win in the expanded playoff? Like, because there's 2 schools of thought here, right? That, hey, there's going to be more volatility because there's more opportunities for the big dogs to get upset early, that they also have to win multiple games in a row, and that if you get the right matchups in a row, you might avoid some of those heavy hitters if you're not a blue chip ratio team, and you can make a deeper run. There's 2 schools of thought on that. And then there's the other one, which is like, who is going to have the dudes to be able to go 3-0 or 4-0 without a top 15 roster in the sport and run that kind of gauntlet? Because one of the reasons we were able to see Washington and TCU do this is because they only had to win one playoff game to get to the national title with the regular season run. It's a little bit different to ask those Cinderellas to do it 2 or 3 or 4 straight times to get to the national title. So what say you? Which one do you lean towards, that we're going to see more volatility at the top and more outside of the top 15 blue chip ratios teams make the college football national championship? Or do you think it's going to be less than what we've seen in the 4-team era?
Easily option 2. Easily. Like, it is without a doubt going to be more difficult to win the national championship if you're not one of these teams that has the most talented roster. Like, I'm not 100% like, we've talked about before how legitimate, the blue chip ratio is. It's kind of a rough, idea of who has the best talent, but you just look at like you said, you just look at the schedule. Like, Washington had to play 13 games to get to the Final Four. They had to play their Pac-12 schedule, and they got to the Final Four. Like, now going through the Big Ten, obviously they're going to have to go through, but to have to go through multiple playoff games potentially, and obviously you could still be in that second round. You have that bye week, but I think it's unquestionably like these smaller schools. Like, I think they might, or I should say, like the non-traditional powerhouses, like they might be in for a rude awakening, that they thought increasing the playoff was going to help them have success in college football. But I think it's actually going to hurt them, because I think you're going to see the most talented teams, like as it plays out, like how good they really are. Because I think you go 12-0 against a weak schedule one year and get in the Final Four, like, and then who knows? You get hot, something like TCU, Michigan. I think most people would pick Michigan to beat that TCU team 9 out of 10 times, but they only played once and TCU beat them. So it's when you get down to that, just kind of crapshoot, like you have a chance. But I think it's going to be a lot more difficult to navigate that with a bigger playoff for the non-powerhouse schools, really.
I think you're right, but I do think there's going to be a year or two where somebody does it. I don't think it's going to be a G5 school. Like, I don't think we'll see Boise or Memphis, who might make it this year, they win 3 straight or something like that. But do I think, like, if Aiden Childs is the dude at Michigan State, right? If he, like, most years, it's still not going to be them. But if he's a Heisman quarterback, Michigan State goes to, I don't know, Ole Miss for their first round, Georgia and or Ohio State is upset in the second round, and they avoid some of the big dogs, and then they just ride the Childs Heisman stuff to a national title game. I think that does happen still. I think we're still going to get those kind of seasons for every now and then, but I don't think you're getting back-to-back like Washington TCU stories in the national championship game. I think more often than not, we're going to have like what we're seeing in college baseball, where back-to-back years we've had SEC teams be in the college baseball World Series championship. I think we're going to see several years, probably over the next 5 to 6, where Ohio State is playing the best team in the SEC in the national title. Like, I think you're going to see that, but I still do think one of these teams, a couple of these teams, will run the gauntlet and surprise everybody by going 3-0, 4-0, because the C's part the right way and they ride. I think it's going to require an elite quarterback, though. I don't think you're going to be able to pull this off.
Yeah, sports are unpredictable. Like, it's going to happen. Someone's going to make a run and have some great story at some point in history. Like things like that. Like Cam Newton is not like probable to happen, something like that, but it did, and it was a magical season. So things are going to happen. It was just easier when you had to run through that Pac-12 schedule that might have like 2 ranked teams on it instead of now having to beat 4 in a row to win a national championship. But things can still happen. I feel like part of this came from like this idea that like the SEC was just getting favoritism in this 4-team playoff, but the SEC in 10 years of the 4-team playoff, the SEC got 2 teams in twice. The Big Ten got 2 teams in at least once. Did they get them in twice? No, I think the Big Ten got 2 teams in 2022, and the ACC got 2 teams in 2020 when Notre Dame was technically part of the ACC that year. So it's like, there were other and I think that was the chance, because at the end of the day, the committee like wants it to be like a nationwide thing. And if they can take the conference champions from those major conferences, like you look at some years where Oklahoma was, maybe, up for grabs with someone else, a second team from another conference, and they went with the conference champion of Oklahoma. So it's like, I think ultimately they wanted to put in those 12-0, those 13-0 and 12-1 conference champions. And now it's like, okay, you got that conference champion, you got that 13-1 season. Congratulations, you're the 4 seed, and you get to play Alabama in the first round.
Yeah, but not the same Alabama that we've been accustomed to seeing. So
could be better. Who knows? Kalen DeBoer could be even better than Nick Saban.
Could he?
I mean, anything can happen. Who knows?
Could he though?
I'm
like
not betting
better?
On it. I hope not. But who knows? I think no one was ever supposed to be better than Bear Bryant. So we'll see. He's obviously
there was a gap there, Matt Green. There was some time in between those.
No, that's definitely true. But obviously, I mean, no one's taken over a healthier program than taking over the one that Nick Saban ran for the last 20 years.
That's true. I would agree with that. All right, Matt Green. Well, that's all I've got here. That was fun. That was a fun exercise. We're getting very close. I think July, we're going to start diving into our conference previews here. It's almost preview season. Rosters are pretty set now.
It'll be a little easier this year. 1 day shorter,
one down.
I guess.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. So we might have to break up. We'll probably end up breaking up the SEC and Big Ten. It's just too much. We're not doing a 18 team preview, 20 team preview. We're not doing that. So we'll probably end up breaking those two up.
16, right? Is the Big Ten at more than 16? Are they 18?
I'm saying, well, aren't they 18 this year?
Were they already 14 and they added?
Yeah, they just added 4.
4. Yeah. Okay. Shit.
Yeah.
They're at 18. SEC's at 16 now. Wow. I got to get used to that. So ACC was at 14, and now they're got SMU,
17,
Cal,
I think.
Stanford.
Yeah, they're 17
now. Okay. We gotta. That's first step. We'll refresh everyone who's in what conference to begin with.
Absolutely. All right, Matt Green. Well, that is all I've got on this fine Tuesday night, but I appreciate it as always, good sir. And we'll be back next week.
Yes, sir.